Hello, I'm David Kibney. I'm the Chief Executive of the UK Public Health Register. I'm creating this webinar in April 2018, and its purpose is to describe the changes taking place in specialist portfolio assessment at the Register. So what I want to explain is that the Board of UKPHR has taken a decision to introduce a new retrospective portfolio assessment route for specialists, which is going to open on the 1st of September 2018. And what's different between this portfolio assessment route and earlier ones is that we've adopted much more closely the learning outcomes from the Public Health Specialty Training Programme 2015 curriculum, both for the knowledge, the know-hows, and the application, the show-hows. And it's also, as a result, much closer to what the General Medical Council does for doctors in terms of an alternative to the training programme in its CSER route, the Certificate of Eligibility for Specialist Registration. Moving on to my next slide, it's worth bearing in mind that currently on the register for specialists, there are 4 ways to get onto the register. And I'll say a little bit more about each of these ways in a moment, but just for here to list them. There's the standard route for those who complete the training programme. There's dual registration for those who are already registered as public health specialists with either the General Medical Council or the General Dental Council, and who wish also to be registered with us. Then there's the RSS, the Recognition of Specialist Status, which is the hangover from the very original purpose for setting up the UK Public Health Register back in 2003. It's for people who are generalist specialists but have not taken the training programme. And the other portfolio assessment route is the defined specialist route. These are the 4 routes that are presently open for specialists. So moving on to the standard route. For specialists who complete the public health specialty programme, they can then register with UK Public Health Register without any additional checks on their competence. Completing the training programme satisfactorily is regarded as sufficient evidence of competence. So the evidence that we require in order to register a new specialist on our register through this route is that they can produce the certificate of completion of training. We also require them to complete our application to be on our register, and there is a time limit for doing that of 3 months from the certificate of completion of training. And obviously, like every other registrant, we expect them to pay the appropriate registration fee. So that's the first of those 4 routes that I mentioned earlier. Moving on to the dual registration route. This is for specialists who are already registered as specialists in public health, as doctors or dentists with either the General Medical Council or the General Dental Council. And instead of proving their competence all over again to the Public Health Register, all that we require is the evidence of their existing specialist registration with the General Medical Council or the General Dental Council. And again, we expect them to complete our application form and pay our registration fee. So someone who's a dual registrant will be paying their registration fees with either the General Medical Council or the General Dental Council. And additionally, they choose to pay registration fees with us because they want that extra recognition, I think, that they are a public health specialist abiding by all the rules as to competence, continuing professional development, and in due course revalidation that applies to all public health specialists. So moving on to RSS, this, as I say, was once the one and only way of getting onto the UK Public Health Register. It was for generalist specialists who'd never had the opportunity to complete the training programme, and they were required to submit a portfolio to UK Public Health Register for retrospective assessment. And today, that is such a rarity that we impose a control on who may apply for this route. They have to have our consent before they can submit a portfolio for assessment. And in the most recent year, we've had 6 requests for permission to start this route, and we've turned them all down. And currently, to my mind, there's only one such portfolio that is being assessed by our assessors for potential registration. We have decided that this has reached the end of its usefulness and it will close in August 2019. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a little while. So just moving on to the last of the 4 existing routes, the defined specialist route was introduced round about 2007-2008. And this again is for specialists who've not had the opportunity to complete the training programme. And instead of registering as a generalist specialist, the idea is that these are people who have a deeper but narrower expertise, and their expertise can be defined in some areas of practice. And it enables them to produce a portfolio for assessment by us. And whilst they still have to show the full range of knowledge of any public health specialist, they're able to get extra marks for one or more of their show hows because of their additional expertise, and as a result not be assessed on some of the other show hows. As with the RSS, this is thought now to have lived its kind of full life, and it's time for it to close, and it will be closing in August 2019 with the RSS route. And again, I'll say some more about this later. So then moving on to the new portfolio assessment route that will replace RSS and defined specialists. What this requires is that every applicant who wants to submit a portfolio for assessment by this new route will have to satisfy all the knowledge requirements that are set out in the 2015 training programme curriculum. So that's all the learning outcomes for knowledge in that curriculum. And this can be done either by passing the Part A exams, as any person on the training programme would do, or if there's not an opportunity to take the exams or a preference not to, they are enabled to submit a portfolio of evidence of their knowledge, which will be assessed by our assessors in the same way that we assess knowledge now. And as well as the knowledge, they have to show the application of the knowledge, as we have always required, the so-called show hows. And what we have done on setting up this new route is to closely map our show how requirements to the 2015 training programme curriculum learning outcomes, so that there's a much greater alignment than was the case in the past with the RSS and with the defined specialist route. So just moving on to how we're going to implement this, our plan is that we will have a 2-stage process. So instead of one day a portfolio arrives at our door with a request for it to be assessed, we will expect people in the future first to submit a written application. We will set out the requirements of the content of the application form and the evidence to provide with it. And this will be like a screening stage for us to check in particular issues like eligibility criteria and make sure that a person who wants to submit a portfolio to us for assessment under the new route is working at the right level and is likely to be successful, subject to providing the right evidence, of course, in their application to register as a specialist. So the 2-stage process is an important new factor for us. We have introduced in the practitioner registration scheme a currency rule for people's evidence, and there's going to be an element of a currency rule for this new portfolio route for specialists as well. In general, 50% of the evidence must be from within the most recent 5 years of practice. There is going to be some movement within that in terms of flexibility, and an implementation group is working on that, and I can't give the full detail today, but in due course we'll be able to. There is an ambition that this new route will be dealt with as an electronic portfolio, an e-portfolio. The problem there is that no such portfolio exists at the present time. We're in discussions with a provider to develop an e-portfolio, and work is being done as I speak. But it's doubtful, I think, that it will be actually ready for use by the 1st of September this year. But we're hopeful of introducing an e-portfolio quite soon after that. And some issues of practicality, I've mentioned the currency rule already, have been delegated by the board to an implementation group chaired by Judith Hooper, one of our moderators, and containing a wide range of members, including 2 members representing the interest of the faculty, who are dealing with the practical issues of implementation, such as new guidance, training for assessors, and so on. They're also working on eligibility criteria, the pre-application process that I've already mentioned, and issues around structuring the reference and the testimonial. So just moving on to a slide about the implementation group's role. As I've said a moment ago, the group is working on the eligibility criteria for the new route, and it's devising the application process and the application forms in draft for approval by the board in due course. It will take the lead in revising the framework and guidance when we're ready to do those, and as I've said already, the requirement for a reference and the requirement for a testimonial will be much more structured in the future than has been the case in the past. The implementation group is also looking at the quality assurance arrangements, making full use of our existing team of moderators in that work, and will take the lead in arranging training for assessors on the new route in due course. So what I've done finally is to provide an indicative timetable for what's going to happen next over 2 slides. So the first one, saying indicative timeline 1, shows the implementation group starting its work on the 31st of January 2018, and takes us through the meetings of the implementation group and the board and communications through to July of 2018. And then on a second slide, I've shown the period from July 2018, the opening of the new route on the 1st of September 2018, and through to the closure of the RSS and defined specialist routes on the 31st of August 2019. So that's the work that's in progress at the present time. The board's role all through this is one of overview and decision maker. So if there are options that the implementation group comes up with, it will be for the board to choose between the options. And where decisions made by the implementation group require work by UK Public Health Register, especially work that has to be paid for, the board is the final arbiter of using our scarce resources for this purpose. But the intention of the board is that the timetable I've set out is going to be met for the introduction of this new route and the phasing out of the existing portfolio assessment routes for specialists. So just moving on to the next slide beyond that time scale, the board has announced that the new route will open on the 1st of September 2018. As I've said already, I am doubtful that the new e-portfolio will be ready for use by that day. But of course, on that day, it is from then that the UK Public Health Register will receive applications from people for this new route. And remember, that's not their portfolio, it's their application form in the manner set out by UK Public Health Register on the recommendation of the implementation group. So the portfolio won't be due until after an application has been successful. So just moving on to my next slide, we've already published on our website, and here I give the link the full framework of competencies for the new portfolio assessment route. And when the implementation group has completed the framework and guidance to go with the competency framework, we'll publish that on our website as well. That's probably going to be in the summer sometime. And it's important for those who have spent a part of their lives preparing portfolios for assessment by the register under RSS and defined specialists to know that we are still open for business to receive their portfolios. In the case of RSS, obviously subject to first granting our prior permission for the route to be used. But anybody subject to that who has produced their portfolio can still send it to us and can continue doing so after the opening of the new route in September 2018. So you can see from that that there's going to be a period of what our implementation group calls double running, where we'll have some portfolios to assess under the existing routes and some new portfolios arriving under the new route for assessment. But just moving on to the next slide, we will then close the RSS and defined specialist routes at the end of August 2019. And what that means is that after that date, we will not receive any more portfolios under those two routes. Of course, somebody who gets their portfolio to us just before that closing date has an entitlement to an assessment of their portfolio, and we are committed to making the assessments of their portfolios and giving them a decision on our assessment, and hopefully eventually leading to their successful registration as a specialist under those routes, even though by the time they get on the register, we will have closed the routes themselves. So just moving on to my next slide, it's never been the case that we've been able, with our scarce resources, to provide any kind of structured support for people who want to prepare a portfolio for assessment by UK Public Health Register. What we have tried to do when people have asked for help is to match an applicant with someone who's been through the process, who is willing to give them the benefit of their experience and advice to support them in working through their portfolio. And now in places where there are workforce leads, I mean specifically in England, Public Health England have workforce leads, it's possible that there is a new source of expertise, advice and sometimes support from those sources as well. And I do know that in some parts of the UK there has in recent times been steps taken to set up support groups for specialists who want to prepare portfolios to submit to UK Public Health Register for assessment. I know of schemes that have set up in Scotland, in London and in the east of England. And maybe there are more that I don't know about, but certainly nothing structured. And one thing that we hope that will come from our changes is that the public health system itself will recognise the importance of providing structured support for people who want to access the new portfolio assessment route. So my last slide is my contact details, finishing this presentation. As I said at the beginning, I've prepared this webinar in April 2018, and time passes, changes will occur. And if people want to check the current position, they are very welcome to get in touch with me and the register at the contact details that I've given here. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this has been useful. Bye bye now.